Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Matt's voice sliced through the heavy, suffocating silence of the Newman ranch like a blade dipped in poison, trembling with rage, terror, and a twisted sense of triumph as he staggered closer to Victor, his eyes burning with a fire that could have swallowed the whole world, shouting, "Don't kill me!" As if he were the victim instead of the monstrous storm he had become. And in that moment the air around them turned electric, crackling with danger, regret, history, and old Newman grudges that had been buried but never truly forgotten, because Matt had always been a shadow lurking behind the legacy of power and wealth that Victor Newman built. A reminder that evil doesn't die. It simply waits for the right moment to strike, and that moment had arrived with devastating force, spiraling wildly when Ashley Abbott, brilliant, compassionate, strong and far too trusting, walked into the storm at the exact second it reached its breaking point, unaware that her life, her fate, and the fragile balance of Genoa City were about to shatter beyond repair as Matt shifted from desperate fugitive to cold-blooded executioner. The night had begun like any other, with the Abbotts and Newmans locked in their usual power struggles, deals, half-truths, and complicated emotional webs that made their families iconic. But it escalated the moment Matt learned that Victor had unearthed the last piece of evidence tying him to an underground network of crimes no one had fully understood yet. A network rooted in manipulation, data theft, chemical trafficking, and silent threats that stretched far deeper than the police imagined. And when Victor confronted Matt in the main room of the ranch, standing tall, confident, and unshaken, Matt snapped like a cornered animal, trembling with a mixture of self-righteous fury and delusional belief that he could somehow negotiate his way out of a grave he had dug with his own hands. Victor's commanding voice, steady and iron-sharp, cut through Matt's rambling attempts to shift blame. "It's over, Matt. You're finished. No one is coming to save you." And those words hit Matt like a gunshot, triggering the panic that had been brewing in him ever since Claire, Sharon, Nick, Kyle, and even Summer had teamed up to expose the darker truth behind Matt's manipulations, pushing him further into instability and rage. But nothing compared to the moment Ashley stepped inside, hearing only Victor's stern tone and Matt's frantic muttering as she rushed in to help, believing she could defuse the situation with empathy and logic just as she had done countless times in her life with people who were unraveling. But Matt was different, Matt was dangerous, Matt was already far gone, and when she softly said his name, stepping toward him with compassion radiating from her eyes, he turned toward her with the detached stare of a man who had stopped seeing human beings and had begun seeing obstacles, enemies, threats. Victor immediately stretched out an arm to block her path, warning her with a low growl, "Ashley, don't." But it was too late because Matt suddenly moved with unnatural speed, grabbing Ashley's wrist in a tight, bruising grip and pulling her toward him as she gasped in fear and shock, her voice breaking as she said, "Matt, please, let's talk about this." But Matt wasn't listening anymore. His mind consumed entirely by a single delusional mission. Survive no matter what, no matter who he had to destroy, no matter the cost. And it was then, at the height of the escalating tension, that he said the three words Victor would never forget. The three words that froze the room. The three words whispered not in desperation but in cold, hollow resentment. "She ruins everything." Those words didn't sound human. They sounded like the snarl of a predator who believed he had finally seized the upper hand. And before Victor could reach them, before Ashley could pull away, before the moment could be reversed or rewritten, Matt raised the weapon he'd kept hidden beneath his jacket, a small, cold, metallic flash that caught the reflection of the chandelier above, and in one swift, horrifying movement he pressed it against Ashley's side and pulled the trigger, the sound exploding throughout the ranch like thunder ripping open the sky, sending Victor into a roar of anguish as Ashley collapsed into his arms, her eyes wide with disbelief, pain, and a heartbreaking mixture of apology and fear. Victor fell to his knees with her, shouting her name, shaking, trembling, tearing the room apart with his tortured cries while Matt stumbled backward, chest rising and falling in manic bursts as if he couldn't believe what he'd just done yet felt empowered by it at the same time. Whispering to himself, "I didn't want this, I didn't want this," as if saying it could rewrite the horror he had unleashed. But Victor's grief quickly ignited into a firestorm of fury. And as he gently lowered Ashley to the floor, whispering, "Stay with me. Don't you dare leave me," he rose like a force of nature, cold, deadly, unstoppable, eyes burning with a force Genoa City had witnessed only a handful of times in its history, and Matt's bravado instantly evaporated, replaced by pure terror as He backed away from the man he had just pushed beyond his last limit. "Don't kill me!" Matt screamed again, desperation twisting his voice as he held up trembling hands, backing into the corner, but Victor continued stepping toward him with slow, lethal precision, his voice dropping to a tone so controlled and terrifying it could freeze blood. "You murdered her. You will pay." Matt tried to run, tripping over himself, fumbling for the door, but the ranch security, alerted by the gunshot, stormed in and tackled him before he could escape, forcing him to the ground as he shouted, cried, cursed, and begged, his words spilling out in a frantic mess as Victor stood over him, breathing heavily, torn between his rage and his grief, watching the man who had just destroyed a life, shattered families, and crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Ashley lay motionless beside the shattered coffee table, her blood staining the rug, her breathing shallow as Victor knelt beside her again, shaking, whispering, "Hold on, Ashley, please hold on," while paramedics rushed inside, trying desperately to stabilize her as the room filled with chaos. Abby bursting and screaming, Jack collapsing at the sight, Tracy sobbing uncontrollably, Nikki covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face, and through it all Matt's voice continued its pathetic, terrified mantra. "Don't kill me, don't kill me, I didn't mean to." But it was too late, far too late, because Victor Newman would never forget the moment, never forgive it, and as Matt was dragged out in chains, Ashley was lifted onto a stretcher, unconscious, pale, and fighting for her life. Genoa City would be forever changed, Newman Enterprises thrown into chaos, the Abbott family torn apart, and the question that would linger over all of them like a haunting storm. Was this the end of Ashley Abbott and the beginning of Victor Newman's darkest crusade yet? The aftermath of Ashley's collapse unleashed a tidal wave of anguish, fury, and unraveling secrets that tore violently through Genoa City as if the entire town had been waiting for a spark, and Matt, reckless, broken, dangerous, had struck the match that ignited every dormant feud, fear, and buried truth. As the ambulance raced toward Memorial Hospital with sirens shrieking across the night sky, Victor sat inside gripping Ashley's hand with desperate strength, whispering promises, memories, and pleas like a man fighting not only for her survival but for redemption from sins he couldn't even name, while Ashley's breaths came out so shallow they barely stirred the air, her eyelids fluttering as if she were drifting between worlds, clinging to the echoes of her daughter's voice, her brother's laughter, her father's teachings, and the countless threads of love and pain that wove the complicated tapestry of her life. Back at the ranch, chaos continued to explode in every direction as Abby screamed at police officers demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding someone pay for the nightmare that had occurred. Her voice breaking into raw, tortured sobs that made even hardened officers pause as Jack cradled his daughter, trying to steady her though his own heart felt like it had been ripped from his chest, his mind looping through memories of Ashley at every age. Stubborn teenager, brilliant chemist, heartbroken survivor, fierce mother, vulnerable sister, and now possibly a victim of a tragedy none of them saw coming even though the signs were always there. Warnings they ignored because Genoa City had learned to live with danger like it was just another piece of furniture. Meanwhile Matt, still screaming, still pleading, still shaking with terror and the adrenaline crash of what he had done, was shoved into a squad car as Nick, Sharon, Summer, Kyle, and Claire arrived in a whirlwind of panic, each shouting questions, accusations, and theories so fast the air crackled with tension. Yet the moment Claire's eyes landed on the blood staining the Newman's rug, she froze as if her lungs forgot how to function, whispering, "Ashley, oh please no." While her mind raced through every conversation she'd had with Ashley in recent weeks, all the kindness Ashley had shown her, the guidance, the wisdom, and now she carried the heavy guilt that if she hadn't been entangled in Matt's web, if she hadn't accidentally helped expose secrets that sent him spiraling, maybe, just maybe, Ashley wouldn't be fighting for her life. Nick stepped forward toward the squad car with barely controlled fury, grabbing the window frame and snarling, "You're done, Matt. You'll never see daylight again." But Matt's eyes darted wildly as he thrashed against his restraints, insisting over and over that he didn't mean to, that it was Victor's fault, that he had no choice. And those pathetic excuses only fueled Nick's rage further as he had to be physically restrained by two officers before he could drag Matt out through brute force. Summer, trembling, wrapped her arms around Claire and held her tightly while Kyle stood rigid beside them, his face ghost white, stunned by the level of violence that continued to target the people closest to him, whispering, how many more people need to suffer because of him?" Yet beneath his anger was a deeper fracture, fear that Genoa City had crossed a line it couldn't return from, that something darker had begun, something bigger than Matt, something connected to the mysterious network Victor had discovered, something that might still be lurking in the shadows. At Memorial Hospital, the chaos only multiplied as Victor paced the waiting room like a caged storm, nurses dodging his path as he barked orders, demands, and desperate pleas for updates, his hands shaking uncontrollably as Nikki tried to calm him, holding his arm and whispering, "Victor, please breathe, she needs you strong." But Victor shoved his hands through his hair, trembling with a kind of helplessness he despised, flashing back to the countless times he had pulled loved ones from the jaws of tragedy. Yet this time felt different, heavier, because Ashley wasn't just another person caught in the crossfire. She was family, history, a woman he had loved, respected, fought, and saved so many times over the decades that the very idea of losing her tore at his sanity. The moment the surgeon finally approached with blood-smeared gloves and an expression that hovered somewhere between concern and exhaustion, every Newman and Abbott shot to their feet, Jack, Abby, Tracy, Victor, Nikki, even the newly arrived Billy, and the doctor's voice, though calm, carried the weight of devastation as he explained the bullet's path, the internal damage, the emergency transfusions, the still unresolved complications, and the chilling reality that Ashley was in critical condition, unstable, and hovering on a razor-thin line between life and death. Abby collapsed into Tracy's arms, sobbing uncontrollably, while Jack turned away, pressing a hand over his mouth as tears streamed down his face, and Victor, whose entire body seemed to sag under the blow, asked in a low, breaking voice, "Is she going to make it?" But the doctor could offer no guarantees, only the platitude that they were doing everything they could. And those words shattered what little composure remained among the families. Billy stormed into the hallway, punching the wall with a roar of anguish while Nikki chased after him, pleading for him to stop before he broke his hand, and downstairs, media vans were already swarming the parking lot, reporters scrambling for the latest details on the most explosive crime Genoa City had seen in years, forcing hospital security to form a tight barricade to keep them from swarming the already devastated families. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room at GCPD, Matt's collapse continued. Sweat pouring off him, eyes wild, voice cracking, his entire body vibrating with fear as Chance, Christine, and Chief Paul stood across the table watching him unravel, each recognizing that despite his panic he remained dangerous, unpredictable, and far more connected to the criminal organization they had been investigating than he had ever admitted. Chance slammed a file onto the table with enough force to make Matt flinch violently, opening it to reveal photos, surveillance shots, coded messages, offshore transactions, and when he demanded details of Matt's role in the network, Matt initially tried to deny everything, but his desperation quickly bled into incoherent ramblings, blaming Victor, blaming Ashley, blaming the Abbotts, blaming Claire, blaming everyone except himself until Christine snapped, leaning in and hissing, "Ashley Abbott might die because of you. You better start talking." But Matt simply buried his face in his hands, shaking, muttering those haunting three words again, "She ruins everything," as if they had seared themselves into his fractured mind. Back at the hospital, hours passed like years as the families remained in the waiting room, alternating between silence, sobbing, anger, and whispered prayers, and as dawn crept across the sky with pale blue light, it illuminated the exhausted faces of every person who cared about Ashley Abbott, yet her fate still hung suspended in uncertainty. Victor finally stepped outside onto the hospital balcony, gripping the railing until his knuckles turned white as he stared toward the city he had conquered decades ago, whispering into the cold morning air, "I swear to you, Ashley, if you live, I will destroy every last person connected to Matt, and if you don't, God help them, because I won't hold back." And in that moment something hardened inside him, something darker than anything he had unleashed before, something that would soon shake Genoa City to its core. Inside the ICU, machines beeped softly as Ashley lay pale and motionless, her breathing supported by tubes, her body fighting a war that no one could see, yet somewhere deep inside her, faint flickers of memory and emotion stirred, Abby's small hands in hers, Jack lifting her onto his shoulders. As a child, Victor brushing a tear from her cheek decades ago, Tucker whispering promises that were never fully kept, Tracy's gentle voice reading to her, Billy making her laugh when she thought she never could again, and those memories created a dim, fragile glow of strength within her, a strength she would desperately need as the storm Matt unleashed continued to grow beyond anything Genoa City was prepared to face, because Ashley's shooting was not the end of the nightmare. It was only the beginning. As daylight fully broke over Genoa City, The sterile brightness of the hospital corridors did nothing to lighten the choking heaviness surrounding Ashley's loved ones, who had now spent nearly an entire night suspended in fear while doctors fought to stabilize her. And though exhaustion clung to every person in the waiting room, none dared to sleep, not Jack, who sat slumped forward with his head in his hands, not Abby, who paced back and forth whispering desperate prayers, not Tracy, who clung to her rosary with trembling fingers, not Victor, whose eyes, bloodshot and burning with barely contained fury, missed nothing as nurses and surgeons rushed past. The air was filled with tension so thick that even the slightest sound, a door closing, a monitor beeping, a doctor clearing their throat, sent a jolt through the group, each moment a cruel reminder that Ashley's life still hung by the thinnest thread imaginable. Meanwhile, in the ICU, Ashley's body remained motionless beneath crisp white sheets, machines humming steadily around her, tubes running to fragile veins, her face pale and too still for the vibrant, fierce woman she was, and yet every so often the slightest twitch of a finger or faint shift of breath brought hope surging through the nurses monitoring her, uncertain whether it was random muscle activity or a sign that the fight within her remained strong. Back in the waiting room, tensions erupted when Tucker stormed through the double doors in a frenzy, demanding answers with a voice that cracked under the weight of heartbreak, his eyes locking onto Victor with explosive fury as he snarled, "This is your fault. You brought that psychopath into our lives." And in an instant Billy and Nick jumped between them, restraining Tucker as Victor stepped forward, jaw tight, replying in a chilling, controlled tone, "If you want to blame someone, blame Matt. He pulled the trigger. Not me." But Tucker wasn't hearing reason. He shoved against Billy's grip as tears filled his eyes, shouting, "She came to your house to help you, Victor. And now she's in there because of you." His voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly the rage in him melted into devastation, his legs giving out as he dropped to the floor, hands covering his face as sobs tore from his chest. The sight broke something in Abby, who knelt beside him with tears streaming down her cheeks, whispering, "We all want someone to blame, but right now we just have to pray." And Tucker, shaking violently, took her hand as if it were the only anchor keeping him from collapsing completely. Claire, standing in the corner, felt a crushing weight of guilt press down on her chest, her mind replaying every interaction she had ever had with Matt, every time she had ignored her instincts about him, every moment she had allowed herself to believe he could change, and now she felt complicit in a tragedy she never could have predicted. Summer noticed her anguish and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, whispering, "This isn't your fault. Matt fooled everyone." But the words barely made a dent in Claire's internal storm as she stared through the glass door of the ICU, silently begging Ashley to hold on, promising herself that if Ashley woke up, she would dedicate every moment of her life to ensuring Matt never hurt another soul. Across town at GCPD, the interrogation room had become a nightmarish theater of Matt's unraveling psyche. He swung between hysterical sobbing, manic rambling, and eerily calm moments where he stared blankly at the wall as if watching memories replay in front of him, and Chance watched with growing concern, recognizing signs that Matt wasn't simply acting out of fear or manipulation. He was disintegrating mentally, trapped in a looping cycle of paranoia, delusion, and self-preservation. Christine leaned forward and slammed a stack of evidence in front of him, emails, coded messages, photos of associates, offshore accounts, and demanded he confess his involvement with the network, but Matt shook his head violently, muttering, "They'll come for me. They'll come for all of you. You don't get it. This is bigger than me." And when Chance asked who they were, Matt's eyes widened with terror, his voice dropping to a whisper, "If I say their names, I'm already dead," sending a ripple of dread through the officers, because it was the first time Matt had admitted he wasn't the mastermind. He was a pawn in something larger, darker, and potentially still active in Genoa City. Back at the hospital, the surgeon finally reappeared, prompting everyone to rise to their feet with breathless, terrified anticipation, and in a solemn voice he explained that Ashley had survived the night but remained in a medically induced coma to prevent further swelling and organ failure. The words both relieved and devastated the family. She was alive but far from safe. Victor felt his knees weaken with the weight of it, collapsing into a chair as Nikki knelt beside him, holding his hands and whispering, "She's still fighting, Victor, she's still here." While Jack exhaled deeply, tears streaming freely as Tracy hugged him tightly, Abby ran to the ICU window, pressing her palm to the glass as she cried, "Mom, please come back to us." And though there was no movement inside the softly lit room, Abby refused to walk away, whispering stories, childhood memories, and promises through the glass as if her mother could somehow hear them from beyond the barrier of machines and medication. And while the families clung desperately to hope, a chilling truth loomed larger with every passing moment. Matt's actions were not an isolated incident, not a spontaneous explosion of madness, but part of a larger, more dangerous scheme unfolding in the shadows of Genoa City, one that Ashley had accidentally stepped into, and the storm that had begun with a gunshot at the Newman ranch was far from over.